Well, we're in Advent season, which is a countdown to Christmas. You may have had an Advent calendar as a kid to help you count down, where you open the box and get a little chocolate out each day or some other kind of treat. They make all sorts of interesting Advent calendars nowadays. Christopher's opening a Lego one, as he loves Legos with little Lego people and things in it. But we have the Advent candles to help us count down to it. And around the Advent candles, we have a nativity scene. Does anybody have a nativity scene at home, in addition to all your other Christmas decorations? Now, it's interesting when we take them out to know what the characters are. You always have the three wise men, yet always depicted as three. In the Bible, it says wise men came from the east. That's a really curious thing in the Bible, a thing that I've never felt like I fully understand it. It says they were magi. Fancy word, that's kind of where we get the word magic or magician. But they were astrologers. Did you know that astrologers? And it's curious because, from the time of Isaiah, Jeremiah, when the Babylonians invade and take a lot of the people off as captives, well, Babylonian culture rubs off on them. We have the book of Daniel written in the Babylonian language of Aramaic. And you have the Babylonian religion, Zoroastrianism, which is astrology. And you have God being very angry at the people of Israel and Judah for practicing astrology. Yet, here we have some astrologers that come out to see this great king that's going to be born, following a star. And it doesn't tell us there were three of them. There might have been two of them. There might have been a few dozen, but we have three of them because we have the three gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense and myrrh were a type of incense. And church tradition gives them three names. Does anybody know their names? We have Gaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior. We're talking about it this week, and Christopher was like, what kind of name is Melchior? That's a strange name. But we don't know where they got their names, but church tradition, that's their name for the three of them that come bearing gifts. We have the angel. The angel appears to Zechariah, telling about the birth of John the Baptist. The angel appears to Mary and to Joseph. There was a question for the kids this week of, well, who was the first to know about Jesus' birth? And kids are sharp. It was God. Then it was the angel. And I think the question meant, who was the first person? Who was the first person to know? Oh, then you have the animals, the livestock. One pastor who had been at a church a long time said, I've been here so long and preached about every character in the Christmas story. I'm starting to talk about the camel and the livestock and what it was like from their perspective. And then, of course, we have Mary and baby Jesus. At our church in Sonoma, they're putting the nativity away because we shared the building with Spanish churches and the Fijian church. Boy, a lady came to me just so terrified that something bad was going to happen because she broke baby Jesus. And then we have Joseph. Joseph, notice in the Bible, he doesn't say anything. So he's often called the forgotten man of Christmas. We're going to talk about Joseph this morning. He's often called to Joseph the Silent. I'm guessing he probably did talk, but in the New Testament account from him, which is most of what we know about him, he doesn't say anything. But we can learn a lot about him from what he does instead of what he says. What does he do? Well, he's obedient. God, God tells him to do things, and then we see in the text, he does it. And in the Bible, that's rare. In the Bible, you have the story of all of our heroes of the faith, our saints, where God asks, in most cases, God asks people to do something, and often they argue with him. Or we have several people telling him, God, pick somebody else. Moses says, I'm slow of speech. Why don't you pick somebody else? And God gets angry with him. We have Jeremiah saying, but I'm a youth. Basically, I'm too young to do what you're telling me to do. And God convinces him. We have Isaiah. How can I do this? I'm a man of unclean lips. And an angel comes and takes a hot coal and cleanses his lips. And then we have a lot of other people and the mistakes they make. We have Abraham telling lies. We have Noah getting drunk. I mean, I appreciate that about the Bible. I see the value in that. If all the people were perfect, then what am I doing here? What are you doing here? But they all have challenges. But Joseph, why did God choose him to be Jesus' earthly father, his adopted father? I think the example of his obedience, not questioning God, but taking him at his word, makes it pretty obvious why he was chosen. Now, one thing I enjoy sometimes reading are advice columns in the paper. Many of them present hard dilemmas of what to do. Popular ones, Dear Abby. And a lot of them from a secular perspective, I don't always agree with the advice. You see a lot of the advice problems, like should I move in with my boyfriend? Types of questions. But you see all sorts. Trouble with friends, trouble with your son or daughter, romantic problems. There was one from the Desiring God with John Piper. Here. How do I know if I'm surrendered to Christ completely? I grew up in a Christian home, studied at a Christian college, got married, worked for Christian organizations. From the outside, that looks good. From the inside, I wonder, how do you know that you surrendered everything? Is it, for example, a mindset of the heart, which relates to making good choices? Is it listening to a sermon instead of watching a TV show? Reading a Christian book instead of non-Christian fiction? Or is it more related to big things, such as becoming a missionary and doing lots of volunteer work? How do I know if my life is completely surrendered to Christ? I pray throughout the day, but I often feel caught up in earthly chores I see no eternal value in. Pastor John, what do you say? He gives a long answer, but a few verses that are helpful about surrendering to God as we see Joseph surrendered to God. Luke 14:33. Any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Words of Jesus. Matthew 10:37. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Matthew 22:37. Basically repeating part of the Ten Commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Philippians 3:7 and 8. Paul says, whatever gain I had, I counted loss for the sake of Christ. I indeed count everything as a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. Pastor John there had expounded upon speak the truth of full surrender, act the truth of full surrender, and pray for the gift of full surrender. Let's look at the Christmas narrative this morning in Matthew chapter 1 and chapter 2. Matthew says this is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother was pledged to be married to Joseph. Sometimes translated betrothed or engaged. And it was interesting, in different cultures have different wedding customs. I think it's really fun to get invited to weddings of a different culture and see the different things that they do and the different ways that they do it. Often it's very beautiful and very meaningful, but in Jewish culture at the time, when you would become engaged, it became a legal contract between families. It was binding, so once you were engaged, if you broke off your engagement, you would need a divorce, even if you hadn't had a wedding ceremony yet or lived together yet. So the way it would work, families would work it out. Marriages were usually arranged. And the tradition was the girls were usually in their teenage years and the men were a little older. And once the engagement was made official, or the betrothal, then oftentimes the girl would continue living at home for a year while the groom would go and build a house or make ready the house to have a wife. So a little bit different than we do it. Us, if we want to break off our engagement, it's, I'm done. That's it. It's over. That's all you have to do. Or here's your ring back. That's really all it takes. But here there's more formality. So Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. We have elsewhere in the text that an angel appears to Mary and tells her she's going to be with child. Just as the angel appeared to Zechariah, telling him that they're going to have a child, being John the Baptist. And Zechariah says, how do I know this is true? My wife and I are really old, well past childbearing years. And the angel says, you're going to be mute until the child is born. And he comes out of the holy place unable to speak. And Mary, she says, how could this be? For I've not been with a man, if you understand how things work. How can I have a child if I've not been with a man? And you could interpret that several ways. In some ways, it's just, yes, Lord. So how does this work? Being respectful. Or in another way, it could be interpreted as like, yeah, right. How's that going to happen? We're not completely sure which. But it says before they came together, Mary and Joseph, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, and yet he did not want to expose her to public disgrace. He had in mind to divorce her quietly. So here it says that he was faithful to the law, or sometimes translated devout. So here's the dilemma. And this was, the Roman world was really a loose place, but There, first century Jews were pretty conservative people. And so this was a dilemma. His young betrothed bride-to-be is pregnant, and you can't hide that forever. And they hadn't had the wedding yet. And as tradition, she's supposed to live at home for a year, so him being a devout man, they're either going to assume they jumped the gun and it's his, and he might be embarrassed about that because the time for them, the wedding hadn't happened yet. Us now might read the text through our own times, through our own cultural lens, and think, no big deal, it happens all the time. Yet, when you read the Bible and study the times of first century Israel, it was a conservative society. Think about the difference between if this happened now or happened in the 1950s or 60s. Yeah, then it was then it could have been a big scandal. An unwed mother-to-be. Families used to be so bent out of shape about this sort of thing, they would often send their daughters off before it became obvious to homes for unwed mothers, so they could have the baby, put the baby up for adoption, and then come home before anybody would know. Be way out of town, so that they or their family wouldn't be embarrassed by it. So here Joseph, being a devout or one who's faithful to the law, so they're going to think it's his. Or if he says, no, we haven't been together yet, then they're going to think he's a fool for still going forward with the wedding, with her carrying a baby that's not his. So if you look at it that way, then thus we have a dilemma on our hands, or a dilemma on his hands. Being a righteous man, he didn't want to expose her to public disgrace, because when this could happen, the law of the day, he could have had her stoned. Yet he cares for her, and so he had in mind to divorce her quietly. Seems he'd made up his mind here. But after he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David. Right before this, we have a lineage, a genealogy of Joseph, being a son of David, a descendant of David. Known as a descendant of David. Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. So here you're going to name him Jesus. It's the Hebrew name, that's the Greek version of the Hebrew name Joshua, because he will save people from their sins. Sin being our biggest problem, salvation from sin being personally our biggest need and the world's biggest need. And so it's reminded the prophecy of Isaiah hundreds of years before. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. God the Son entered the human race, came to be with us as a gift. Emmanuel. People are often asked, what's your favorite name for God? Favorite name of God, favorite name for Jesus? I'd have to say mine's Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. A good reminder that God hasn't left us here alone. God didn't just create the world and sit back and watch and let everything happen. But he's here with us because he loves us and because he cares about us. So that's a name for Jesus, Emmanuel. Something we need to remember. Emmanuel, God with us. God is with us is the greatest Christmas present under the tree that we could ever have. Then the angel appears to three people, to Zechariah. Zechariah laughs and disbelieves. Mary, how can this be? We don't know if that held the seed of doubt or not from what was being said. But then we see Joseph here. Say next. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord commanded him and took Mary home as his wife. That was a hard situation. That's, if you imagine, that's advice column type of material. Like, hey, dear Abby, what do I do? I'm engaged to a nice young girl, and she's pregnant, but it's not mine. But she's a really nice girl, and I care about her. Should I go forward with it? Should I have her stoned? Should I just do it quietly? That seems to be from the text probably what's going on in his head. We have to be careful with biblical narratives, though. We often hear, okay, this is what Abraham did, and this is what he was thinking, and sometimes we don't know. It's a lot of speculation when we're working through those things. But it said he had in mind to divorce her quietly. He had in mind to divorce her quietly. So we do know that's what's in his mind, and this is what's going through his head, and these are the things that he's thinking about. And biblical narratives can be hard. Most of our heroes in the Bible, like I said, did a few disobedient things on the way. Did obedient things. We can look at biblical narratives and ask, are they prescriptive or are they descriptive? Is it telling you what happened, or is it laying out a model for us to follow? Do we take a simplistic view of them all, and do we just read the stories and say, do what Abraham did? Here's what he did. Do what he did. Here's what Ahab and Jezebel did. Here's what Ananias and Sapphira did. Don't do what they did. Is it a little deeper? Is it a little more complex? Yeah, it's a lot more complex. Thinking about what they're doing. But here we see Joseph. He woke up. He did what the angel of the Lord commanded him and took Mary home as his wife. No asking the Lord, why don't you, this is hard, why don't you pick somebody else to do it? Or are you sure you have the right man? Or just not doing it. That's an option. Maybe some of the most blatant disregard for God telling somebody to do something is Jonah. Hey, go preach to Nineveh. Nineveh's a dangerous place, but I want you to go and preach there. It seemed Noah hated those people. He didn't want anything to do with it. Bible tells us he went and found a ship going the opposite direction to get as far away from Nineveh as possible. And we know what happened to him. God causes a shipwreck and causes some sort of sea monster to swallow him and spit him out on the shore of Nineveh. So it's a fantastic story. But when God asks you to do something, ask yourself, do I want to do it the easy way or the hard way? Jonah picked the hard way. A lot of people in the Bible pick the hard way. They don't want to do what was asked of them the first time. They don't want to do it now. They want to do it later. They want to argue with God. They want to try to negotiate the terms of the deal as if we have something to offer, as if we have some sort of leverage over God, as if God needs anything from us because he already has everything he could already. I mean, he made everything. What are we going to give him? Well, what he really wants is our heart. He really calls us for our obedience, yet we see in the Bible few people are that obedient. Evangelist D.L. Moody in the 1800s, the great evangelist, Moody Bible Institute's named after him, quite a man, but he said, the world has yet to see what God can do with a man fully consecrated to him. By God's aim, by God's help, I aim to be that man. He's saying the world has not yet seen anybody that's fully consecrated to God. If one person is really obedient, surrendered, and fully given over to God, what would that look like? I think that was the question of the advice column we read. What does it mean to be fully surrendered to God, to be fully obedient to him? Are you fully obedient to God? Are you holding some areas back? Oh, if you think, no, of course not, I'm fully obedient to God, I mean, you're better than almost every person in the Bible. I mean, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we can read these stories of other people's disobedience and say, how could they? Why didn't they just listen to God? Yeah, I do that sometimes when I read the Bible, but when we do that, we need to look in the mirror sometimes and get real honest with ourselves. But Joseph, he doesn't say anything. And with that we see he didn't talk back. He didn't negotiate. He didn't try to make a deal. He didn't try to ask God to find somebody else. God said, and he did. We know about him. I mean, he's introduced in the story that he's betrothed, and it says he was a righteous man, a devout man, one who was faithful to the law. And that's key to the story. And because of his righteousness, his devoutness, his being faithful to the law, the angel told him what the Lord commands. Not an easy situation, and he did it. And then the next verse, but he did not consummate the marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. So he took her in, he accepted her as his wife, and didn't touch her for all those months. Then Matthew chapter 2, verse 13, narrative picks up again on them. It has in between the story of the wise men coming, following the Star of Bethlehem, looking for the great king that's going to be born, and meeting with King Herod to say, hey, we're looking for this great king that's going to be born. Herod, though, says, when you find him, come back to me and tell me where he is, so that I too may go and worship him. When, in fact, he wanted to find if there's another king, that other king in the region is a great king born, a threat to his throne and his dynasty. I mean, we could see him as a sort of Disney villain. Like, come and tell me where he is, so I too may go and worship him. You know, like one of the wicked witches, or Jafar, or Scar. You know, one of the great villains. But the wise men are warned in a dream not to go back to Herod because his plot was revealed to them, that he wanted to harm the child. Herod, Herod meant business. Herod, Herod was a rather scary king. Um, Herod, Herod the Great here. We have a few Herods in the Bible stories because it's a dynasty. His, his son and his grandson are also there in the Bible, but a few things we know about him and why he wanted to do away with this threat to his throne as he saw it. Herod executed his wife Mariamne in 29 BC over accusations that she had committed adultery and was trying to kill him. So this guy in the Bible story, he had killed his wife because of rumors, because of paranoia. The king also executed his sons Alexander and Aristobulus in 7 BC, and Antipater II, Herod's oldest son, whom he had had with another wife, in 4 BC. He accused his 3 sons of trying to kill him so that they could take the throne. We think a lot of fathers would be happy to retire and see their business or their throne go to their son. I mean, how power hungry do you have to be to kill your wife, and not 1 son, but 3 sons, because they might take your throne before you're ready to see them take it? I mean, holding on to power at any cost. I mean, he was a mixed bag. He did a great building campaign and made the area really beautiful and built some great things. So some people liked him. But on the other hand, he was a scary ruler. Might be like the dictator of North Korea that has a lot of people executed because of paranoia. So Matthew 2, picking up again at verse 13. When they had gone, that's the wise men, they came to see baby Jesus. Jesus was born. And when they leave, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Interesting thing too, angels appear to all these people in the Bible. We see when angels appear to people in their heavenly glory, they always have to tell people, don't be afraid, for God has sent me. And remember a few weeks ago we talked about angels in the Bible. We had a few pictures. The most common we see are the cherub, not the chubby baby, but a winged lion with a man's body, or the seraphim, which is another word for the serpents. If anything that looked like either of those appeared to me, I'd probably run. They're always telling you, don't. We see angels appear to people in disguise too, where they just think they're an ordinary person. But here the angel didn't tell Joseph not to be afraid. He just says, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife. And here, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child and kill him. And so what did he wake up and do? Did he wake up and wonder, was this just a dream? You ever dream about goofy things that doesn't make any sense? Or you have a dream that was just so real, you wake up wondering if it really happened, but still it doesn't always make sense? Or sometimes you have a dream that some dreams are nonsense and some dreams really tell you something. God speaks to people sometimes in dreams and through dreams. We see that throughout the Bible, starting with Joseph and the dreams that the Lord gave to him. Joseph, not this Joseph, but Joseph the patriarch, Joseph the dreamer. And so what does Joseph in this narrative do? Verse 14. So he got up, he took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. So you're going to move, and you're going to move today. No warning. Not an easy thing to do if you have stuff. He and Mary didn't even have a chance to go and get their stuff. They only had the stuff they brought with them to Bethlehem. It says he got up, he took the child and his mother during the night, not even the morning. Took the child during the night and left for Egypt. I don't know how that went or how that went over. I mean, the announcement hadn't been made. I mean, honey, wake up. We're going to move to Egypt. When? We're going to go now. Obedience. Obedience, peace. He seemed to have great peace about all this, as we have the peace candle this morning. Where did he get all this inner peace? From obedience, from trusting God, from taking God at his word, for being fully surrendered to God. He got up, took the child and his mother, and during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so it was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So, the Bible doesn't tell us that much about Jesus' childhood. Next thing we really know, I mean, Jesus was born, they had him circumcised, they're visited by the wise men. It's probably a little bit later than the night in which he was born when the shepherds came. But then they get up and leave for Egypt and stay there, and then the next time we see Jesus, where the story picks up of Jesus and his life, is when he was 12 years old going to the temple, where his parents end up losing him there and heading home without him and realizing that he's not there 3 days later. Quite a story. And find Jesus teaching in the temple. But at this time, he lived his younger years in Egypt. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and in the vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Verse 19. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who are trying to take the child's life are dead." So what do you suppose he does? He got up and he took, verse 21, so he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. So he went back. And this had to be hard. I don't think this was really fun. We wonder what happened. This is speculation. The angel shows up again in a dream. Was it, oh, you again? Probably not. He's obedient. Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. I mean, it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple to just do what God tells you to do. Like Joseph, it says that he was faithful to the law. What's the law? The law is referred to as what we have as the Old Testament, the Scriptures. So he was faithful to the Scriptures. The Bible tells us a lot of hard things to do. Are we faithful to the Scriptures? No. Hopefully most of the time. But all the time, if it was being written about us, would it say you or I? Man, faithful to the Scriptures? Faithful to law? I would hope so, but it's hard to do, and that's why Joseph is remarkable. He just had this sense of peace, this sense of trust in God. God says it, and he did it. Very simple, but rare. Extremely rare. And it doesn't say it directly, but I believe that's why God chose him for this all-important job to raise the Messiah, to raise Jesus, to be a model for him of what a father should be, a righteous man. So he got up, he took the child and his mother, and he went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. Now this was intentional. He had lived there before, but Nazareth was a sort of backwoods place. The population is estimated at the time to be about 400 people. That's kind of a small town. 400 people. Chances are then everybody probably knew everybody's name. They knew who he was, they knew who Jesus was, they knew what they were about. And other than these texts, we don't know a whole lot else about Joseph. We see that later on Joseph was gone. We see Mary and the brothers of Jesus, siblings of Jesus, appearing in the Gospels at different times. And we see Jesus, being the oldest, was taking care of his mother, because when he was on the cross, he said to John, "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. As of take care of my mother." Now he wouldn't have said this, we don't think, if Joseph had still been alive. So he dies at some point. One other thing we know about him is he was a carpenter. Or was he? We see, and how we know that, we see in a few verses of, hey, Jesus is preaching and doing miracles. Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph the carpenter? We have Bible movies, and we have Bible cartoons for children, and we have children's books, and we have elsewhere in the gospel. Is this not Jesus the carpenter? Yes, the word is tekton, which means skilled craftsman in Greek. Tekton, which could mean a lot of things. It meant skilled craftsman. So it's funny, if next time you read the children's Bibles and in these narratives, where sometimes you see Jesus in a wood shop making furniture. Often you see him depicted as he's carving a table and chairs. In some places you see him building a house. Some people have thought that no, the word could also mean stonemason or builder. There was a village right next to them that had been destroyed just a few years before Jesus' birth that needed a whole lot of people as they were rebuilding the city. So some people think that Jesus and his father, Jesus being a carpenter too, logic would say, learn the trade from his father and working with him. Were they going to work in this nearby larger town to build it? Justin Martyr, which was one of the early church writers who died in 165. So definitely um, far enough away where he didn't know Jesus personally, wrote that Jesus made yokes and plows. And there were some other similar early church references. It's the word tekton is from the same root word that gives us technology. It could have meant that they were learned men being advanced. We see the same word in 2 Timothy, talking about a workman who needs not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, doing the tekton workman work of laboring in the scriptures. So perhaps people say that it's been one that was highly literate. The Jewish word for carpenter is nagar, which could indicate, I made some notes here, that he was considered wise and highly literate in the Torah, being the law. And here we see, so that in these verses we've read are really about all we know about Joseph. That's it. He's sort of the forgotten man of Christmas. Sort of just tells us a little bit about him. If you're in a Christmas play and you're a bad actor, you either get to be a tree or a sheep or Joseph. Because Joseph in the Christmas play here, he just gets to stand there. He doesn't usually get to say anything. But even though he's called the forgotten man of Christmas, or Joseph the Silent, he does what God says. Without backtalk, without negotiating, without disobeying. So finishing the narrative here, he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So it was fulfilled what is said through the prophets, that he would be called the Nazarene, being the Messiah. And with this, even though he doesn't have anything to say, he embodies what the Bible teaches us. James 1 verse 22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. So, not to just be a hearer of the word, but a doer of the word. Joseph, even though he didn't have anything to say in the Bible, perhaps he says more by being a doer of the word, a man of peace and a man of great obedience, a man of faith. James 2:14 says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes or daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace,' keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds.' You believe that there is one God? Good, even the demons believe that and shudder." You're saying your faith? It's by faith we're saved. Ephesians 2 tells us that. But saving faith produces works, produces obedience. Real faith is lived. And Joseph, even though he's not recorded saying a word, his actions speak louder than words, just like our actions speak louder than words. And so as we learn about this forgotten man of Christmas, ask yourself, how surrendered am I to God? What areas might I be holding back? In what ways might I still be disobedient? How can I be more like Joseph, the forgotten man of Christmas, man of faith, man of peace? Amen. Now, as we close, if you feel like you don't know Jesus and you want a relationship with Him, and want to learn about God's plan for your life, I just invite you to come forward and pray with me. If you've been holding back and want to give more of yourself to God, come up and pray with me. Or if